Hello, I'm Tom. I'm a secondary school teacher of 12 years now, and up until recently I was Key Stage 3 lead and primary liaison. So this is a kind of introduction to a series of videos I'm going to do that focus on the transition from primary school to secondary school, and in particular on Year 7 and that experience, how you can cater to it. So anyone in education or involved in education will tell you that secondary education is divided into the three key stages, 3, 4 and 5. And key stages 4 and 5, because they come with public examinations, tend to hog the limelight. And I think that can be a huge mistake. Key stage 3 doesn't come with quite the same pressure or prestige. So I get why there can be at times, I think, just a touch of complacency, though no one wants to or perhaps even should admit it, it does happen. The first thing I'd like to say is that though we bracket those 3 year groups together as Key Stage 3, Year 7, Year 8 and Year 9, I think more change occurs in those 3 years than any of the other key stages at all. To characterise them very briefly, when you have a Year 7 class arrive, it's really quite striking just how much their own attitude and behaviour is guided by things like curiosity and dynamism and enthusiasm and a willingness to engage. By the time they get to Year 8, a degree of familiarity has set in with people in the place, and they are just beginning to gently push the boundaries. Then you get to Year 9, and suddenly you've got the all-conquering arrival of hormones on the one hand and no public examinations on the other. So it's a bit of a perfect storm, so things can get a little bit livelier when compared to those starry-eyed Year 7s. So a tremendous amount of change takes place during what's typically called Key Stage 3. So as a secondary school teacher, I have Year 7 on my timetable, I always have. And again, I know I probably shouldn't admit this, but I think it's true, and I think most teachers would admit that they have felt this to some extent. When you look at your timetable for that day or that period, and you realise that it's Year 7, okay, and I think sometimes can feel just a slight sense of relief, because Year 7 doesn't really come with the same set of problems or pressures that many of the older groups can bring. Typically, the behavioural issues, the expectations in terms of classroom management or results or flight paths or value added or whatever, those things don't tend to exert as much pressure in a Year 7 environment. Not always, but often. But as I said earlier, that comes with it at the same time the risk of allowing just a touch of complacency to arrive, and that's really dangerous. So I'm going to talk about in the following videos how best to understand a Year 7 classroom environment and how best to harness what it is you have before you. I know when I try and generalise in terms of year groups and their experience, inevitably I'm going to fall short in certain respects. Schools, classes, year groups, they're profoundly different depending on who you are, where you are, etc, etc. But that doesn't mean we can't arrive at some generally agreed upon / useful principles. At least I hope we can, and that's what I'm aiming for. This is aimed primarily at, I think, primary school teachers on the one hand to consider how best to prepare their students for secondary school, and on the other, obviously, secondary school NQTs, recently qualified teachers, anyone who has an interest in how it might be best to approach a Year 7 environment. So there'll be three videos from a pastoral perspective and 3 videos from an academic perspective. I sincerely hope you find them useful. If you do, by all means, leave feedback, and if you think there is anything of worth in the videos, then please do subscribe, because there'll be plenty more on the way.